My name is Sarah, and I have learned that sometimes the people who promise to stand beside you forever are the very ones who walk away when you need them most. I had just completed one of the toughest periods of my life, army training. Every day had tested my strength, discipline, and determination, but I graduated with pride, believing I was returning home to a family that would celebrate my achievement. My husband, Daniel Carter, had called several times during my training to tell me how proud he was. My mother-in-law, Margaret Carter, had even said they were planning a special party in my honor. I believed every word they said because I had never imagined they were hiding something so devastating. The celebration was held in the Grand Ballroom of the Grand Wellington Hotel in Boston, America. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements, and smiling guests dressed in expensive evening wear. Families of military officers filled the hall, congratulating one another while soft music played in the background. As I entered the ballroom wearing my dress uniform, many people applauded and thanked me for my service. For a brief moment, I felt proud of everything I had accomplished. I thought the evening would become one of the happiest memories of my life. I had no idea it would become the day everything I believed in would fall apart. After dinner, Daniel stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone, asking everyone for their attention. I smiled, expecting him to thank me publicly or perhaps announce a celebration of my military achievement. Instead, he invited my younger sister, Olivia Bennett, and my mother-in-law onto the stage beside him. Margaret held a large envelope in her hands and walked toward me with an expression so cold that it instantly made me uneasy. Without saying a kind word, she handed me the envelope and told me to open it in front of everyone. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the papers inside. The title at the top of the first page immediately caught my attention. It was a divorce agreement. Before I could even process what I was reading, Margaret spoke loudly enough for every guest in the ballroom to hear. She declared that she had no interest in having the wife of a petty officer as part of her family and believed Daniel deserved someone with greater status and influence. Then Daniel reached for Olivia's hand and announced that he intended to marry her because she was the successful CEO of Bennett Global Holdings. My own sister stood beside him without the slightest sign of guilt or shame. She looked directly into my eyes and calmly said that business, success, and social standing mattered far more than loyalty or family. At that moment, I realized I had lost not only my husband but also my sister. The room became so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. Every guest watched me closely, waiting for tears, anger, or desperate pleas. Instead, I slowly picked up the pen resting on the table. I looked at Daniel, then at Olivia, and finally at Margaret before taking a deep breath. Without saying a single word, I signed every page of the divorce papers. I placed the pen back on the table, folded the documents neatly, and handed them to Daniel. Their confident smiles faded because my calm response was the one thing they had never expected. Carrying nothing but my dignity, I turned around, walked out of the Grand Wellington Hotel, and stepped into the cold night air. I had entered that ballroom believing I had a family waiting for me. I left knowing that sometimes the strongest soldiers fight their hardest battles long after the war is over. Walking away from the Grand Wellington Hotel that night was the hardest thing I had ever done. During my army training, I had endured freezing weather, exhausting obstacle courses, and sleepless nights, but none of those experiences came close to the pain of being betrayed by my own husband, my own sister, and my own mother-in-law in front of hundreds of people. I carried only a single suitcase as I stepped into the cold streets of Boston, America. The city lights blurred before my eyes, but I refused to cry. They had expected me to break down in front of everyone. They wanted to see me beg for another chance. Instead, I walked away with my head held high because I knew my dignity was worth far more than a marriage built on lies. I spent the next few days in a quiet hotel, trying to figure out what my next step should be. Every morning I woke up reminding myself that my life had not ended, it had simply changed direction. My savings had dropped to just $3,200, so I knew I couldn't afford to waste time feeling sorry for myself. I searched for apartments online and eventually found a small one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, America. The rent was $950 a month, and although the apartment was modest, it was clean, bright, and overlooked a peaceful neighborhood park. The moment I signed the lease, I felt as though I had taken back control of my own life. It wasn't a luxurious home like Ashford Manor, but every corner of it belonged to me alone. After unpacking my belongings, I carefully looked through everything I had brought with me. There were a few family photographs, several military awards, some books, and a jewelry box filled with expensive gifts Daniel had given me during our marriage. I stared at the jewelry for a long time before making a decision. Those necklaces, bracelets, and rings no longer represented love. They represented deception. The following day, I sold every piece to a reputable jeweler and received nearly $6,700. I deposited every dollar into my savings account without the slightest regret. I wasn't selling memories, I was investing in my future. Life quickly settled into a routine. Every morning I woke before sunrise, exercised at a nearby park, prepared a simple breakfast, and spent hours searching for employment. My military training had taught me discipline, patience, and leadership, but finding the right opportunity still required persistence. I submitted applications to several private security firms and consulting companies across America. Some rejected me without explanation, while others never responded at all. Each rejection stung for a moment, but I reminded myself that giving up had never been part of my character. One afternoon, my phone rang while I was reviewing my resume. The caller was General Richard Hayes, one of the senior officers who had supervised part of my military training. His calm voice immediately brought back memories of long training exercises and leadership drills. "Sarah," he said warmly, "I've been following your career, and I recently heard about everything that happened. I'm sorry you had to go through such public humiliation." "Thank you, General," I replied. "I'm trying to move forward." "I know you are," he answered. "That's exactly why I'm calling. A company called Iron Shield Security is searching for a regional operations manager. They need someone with integrity, leadership, and military experience. I believe you're the right person." His recommendation meant more to me than he probably realized. 2 days later, I attended the interview at Iron Shield Security's headquarters in downtown Seattle. The building was modern, with towering glass walls and a professional atmosphere that immediately impressed me. The interview panel asked detailed questions about handling emergencies, protecting corporate executives, managing teams under pressure, and making ethical decisions during difficult situations. Instead of feeling nervous, I answered honestly, drawing upon the lessons I had learned both in the military and in my personal life. The following morning, I received an email offering me the position. The starting salary was $9,500 per month, along with health benefits, performance bonuses, and leadership training opportunities. I read the email several times before finally accepting the offer. For the first time since my divorce, I allowed myself to smile without forcing it. I wasn't succeeding because of my family name or because of someone else's influence. I had earned the opportunity through my own hard work. The months that followed became some of the busiest of my life. I worked long hours, volunteered for additional responsibilities, and treated every assignment as though my future depended on it. My supervisors appreciated my discipline, while my colleagues respected my willingness to help others. Before long, I was entrusted with overseeing several important security operations involving multinational clients across Europe and America. Every successful project strengthened my confidence and reminded me that my worth had never depended on Daniel's approval. Although I focused on my career, it was impossible to avoid hearing news about Daniel and Olivia. Their photographs appeared regularly in business magazines and online articles. Olivia continued leading Bennett Global Holdings, while Daniel enjoyed the luxurious lifestyle that came with being married to one of the country's most influential executives. They attended charity galas, business conferences, and exclusive social events. Friends occasionally asked whether seeing those stories upset me. Surprisingly, they no longer did. I had stopped comparing my life to theirs because I had finally discovered my own purpose. Exactly 1 month after our divorce, I was finishing paperwork at my office when my phone vibrated. The call came from Emily Foster, a close friend from my military training. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I didn't want you to hear this from the news." My heart skipped a beat. What happened? There was a terrible accident outside Manchester, Europe. Daniel and Olivia's car crashed into a concrete barrier during heavy rain. For several moments, I couldn't find the right words. They both survived, Emily continued, but Olivia's injuries were severe. The doctors had no choice but to amputate both of her legs. I slowly lowered myself into my office chair as I absorbed the news. I didn't feel happiness or revenge. Losing both legs was a heartbreaking tragedy for anyone, regardless of what they had done. Yet I couldn't ignore the strange reality of how quickly life could change. Just weeks earlier, Olivia had proudly stood beside Daniel, believing she had won everything. Now she faced a future she had never imagined. Emily hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else." Bennett Global Holdings held an emergency board meeting this morning. They've removed Olivia as CEO because they believe she won't be able to manage the company during her recovery. After ending the call, I sat quietly in my office, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The same people who had judged my worth based on titles, wealth, and status had lost the very things they valued most. Meanwhile, I had rebuilt my life with honesty, determination, and hard work. As I drove home that evening, I realized something important. Success isn't measured by the house you live in, the title printed on your business card, or the people standing beside you when life is easy. True success is measured by your ability to stand back up after life knocks you down. My journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking behind me anymore. I was looking forward, and the future no longer frightened me. Life has a strange way of changing everything in the blink of an eye. Just a few months earlier, Daniel, Olivia, and Margaret had stood proudly on a stage at the Grand Wellington Hotel, believing they had complete control over everyone's future. They had looked at me with pity, convinced that I would never recover from the humiliation they had caused. While they celebrated what they believed was the beginning of their perfect life together, I quietly rebuilt mine one day at a time. I never wished misfortune upon them, but I also knew that every decision carries consequences. Eventually, life has a way of collecting the debts people leave behind. By the time I had completed 6 months at Iron Shield Security, my career had advanced beyond anything I had imagined. My supervisors trusted me with some of the company's largest corporate security projects across America and Europe. I frequently traveled between Seattle, Boston, London, and Manchester, meeting executives, organizing security operations, and leading experienced teams. My salary had increased to $12,800 per month, and I had saved more than $58,000 through careful budgeting and performance bonuses. For the first time in years, I felt completely independent. Every dollar I earned represented my own hard work, and every achievement belonged solely to me. One Monday morning, our company's chief executive, Michael Reynolds, called me into his office. He congratulated me on successfully completing another international assignment and informed me that I was being promoted to Regional Director of Operations. Along with the promotion came an annual salary of $265,000, a company vehicle, and the responsibility of overseeing security contracts throughout both Europe and America. I thanked him sincerely, but deep inside, I wished my late father could have witnessed that moment. He had always believed that integrity and determination would eventually open doors that money alone never could. Later that afternoon, as I was leaving the office, Emily Foster called me again. Her voice sounded calmer than it had during our previous conversation, but I could immediately tell she had more news to share. "Sarah, she began, Olivia has officially lost her position. I remained silent, allowing her to continue. The board of Bennett Global Holdings voted unanimously to appoint a new CEO. They thanked Olivia for her years of service, but they said the company needed active leadership during such an uncertain financial period. I wasn't surprised. Large corporations rarely made decisions based on emotions. They protected profits before people. Olivia had once believed her title made her untouchable, but the board had reminded her that every executive could be replaced. A few weeks later, another piece of news reached me through mutual acquaintances. Investors had lost confidence in Bennett Global Holdings after months of unstable leadership. Several important contracts worth nearly $48 million had been cancelled, causing the company's value to decline significantly. Newspapers that had once praised Olivia's business achievements now questioned the company's future. Reporters who had eagerly requested interviews with her had suddenly disappeared. Public admiration can be surprisingly temporary. As Olivia struggled with losing both her career and her health, Daniel began spending less and less time at the rehabilitation center where she was receiving treatment. Friends noticed that he frequently attended social events alone, claiming he was too busy with business obligations. The truth was much simpler. Daniel had never truly loved Olivia. He had loved the prestige that came with being married to a powerful chief executive. Once the position disappeared, so did much of his devotion. Nearly 7 months after their wedding, Daniel visited Olivia carrying a familiar envelope. Ironically, it looked almost identical to the one he had handed me at the Grand Wellington Hotel. Inside were divorce papers. According to people who witnessed the conversation, Daniel calmly explained that their marriage was no longer working and that they wanted different things in life. Olivia reportedly stared at him in disbelief before asking how he could abandon her after everything she had sacrificed for him. Daniel's answer was painfully simple. I deserve another chance to be happy. Those words eventually reached me through Emily. I couldn't help remembering the night Daniel had spoken similar words while standing beside my sister. Back then, he had believed he was exchanging an ordinary wife for a more successful future. Now he was walking away from the very woman he had claimed was perfect. The divorce attracted widespread media attention because both Daniel and Olivia had become well-known public figures. Business magazines published stories about the collapse of their relationship, while newspapers questioned whether ambition and betrayal had finally caught up with them. Their once glamorous reputation disappeared almost overnight. Many of the friends who had attended their extravagant wedding quietly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with public scandal. Margaret Carter suffered as well. During Daniel's marriage to Olivia, she had enjoyed an expensive lifestyle filled with luxury shopping trips, private clubs, and elegant dinner parties. She often boasted about her family's success and openly criticized those she considered beneath them. After Daniel's divorce, however, financial reality arrived much faster than she expected. Several of Daniel's risky investments failed, leaving him with significant debt. Their expensive home was sold to cover outstanding loans, and most of their luxury possessions were auctioned. The lifestyle they had proudly displayed disappeared piece by piece. One evening, while attending a corporate meeting at the Grand Wellington Hotel in Boston, I decided to have dinner before returning to Seattle. As I walked toward the restaurant, I noticed a familiar figure through the kitchen doorway. At first, I thought I was mistaken. But when the man turned around, I recognized him immediately. It was Daniel. Instead of wearing expensive tailored suits, he now wore a plain hotel uniform with a white apron tied around his waist. His hands were wet with soap as he stood beside a large industrial sink washing stacks of dishes. The confident smile that had once impressed magazine photographers had been replaced by exhaustion. A few steps away stood Margaret. She was wearing the same uniform, quietly drying plates before placing them on metal shelves. The woman who had once declared that I wasn't worthy of her family was now working long shifts alongside her son for $16 an hour. Neither of them noticed me immediately. I stood there silently for several seconds, remembering the ballroom where they had publicly humiliated me. Life had brought us back to the same hotel, but our positions had completely changed. I wasn't standing there because I wanted revenge. I was there because my work had brought me to an important business meeting. They were there because circumstances had forced them to rebuild their lives from the bottom. Daniel finally looked up and saw me. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes filled with embarrassment as he slowly removed his gloves. "Sarah," he whispered. I simply nodded politely. There was no hatred left inside me. Anger had disappeared long ago, replaced by something much stronger, acceptance. I realized that revenge had never been necessary because life itself had already written the ending to their choices. Without saying another word, I turned and walked toward the restaurant dining room. Behind me, the sounds of running water and clattering dishes continued, echoing softly through the kitchen. As I sat down for dinner, I understood something I had once struggled to believe. Success is never about watching others fall. It is about rising high enough that the pain they caused no longer has the power to follow you. That night, as I looked through the restaurant window at the lights of Boston, I quietly smiled. My journey had never been about proving them wrong. It had always been about proving to myself that I was stronger than the betrayal that once threatened to destroy me. As I left the restaurant that evening, I didn't look back at the kitchen. There was no reason to. The past had already taken enough of my time, my trust, and my happiness. Seeing Daniel and Margaret working quietly behind the sink did not fill me with satisfaction or revenge. Instead, it reminded me how quickly life can change when people build their future on pride instead of honesty. I stepped outside the Grand Wellington Hotel, took a deep breath of the cool evening air, and looked at the bright lights of Boston, America. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. I wasn't carrying anger anymore. I wasn't carrying regret. I was carrying hope, and that was far more valuable. Over the next several months, my responsibilities at Iron Shield Security continued to grow. As Regional Director of Operations, I supervised security teams across both America and Europe, traveling regularly to London, Manchester, Boston, and Seattle. Every successful project strengthened the company's reputation, and every challenge reminded me why I had chosen to keep moving forward after my divorce. My annual salary of $265,000 allowed me to save carefully, and before long I had purchased a beautiful home called Willow Crest House on the outskirts of Seattle. The house wasn't the largest in the neighborhood, but every room represented something priceless: independence. Every payment had been made with money I had earned through my own determination. Life finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. My mornings began with a walk through the nearby park before heading to the office. My evenings were often spent reading books, exercising, or speaking with former military colleagues who had remained loyal friends throughout my difficult journey. Unlike the people who had judged me according to titles or wealth, these friends valued loyalty, courage, and honesty. They reminded me that genuine relationships are built on respect rather than personal gain. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after my divorce, I received an invitation to speak at the International Leadership Summit in London, Europe. Executives, military officers, and business leaders from across Europe and America would attend the conference to discuss leadership, resilience, and ethical decision-making. Iron Shield Security had nominated me as one of its keynote speakers because of the projects I had successfully managed during the previous year. Standing before hundreds of experienced professionals was an incredible honor, and I accepted the invitation immediately. The conference was held, coincidentally, at the Grand Wellington Hotel. Walking through its entrance once again brought back memories of the night my marriage had ended. I remembered standing in the ballroom with divorce papers in my hands while everyone waited for me to break down. This time, however, I entered through the front doors as an honored guest. My name appeared on the welcome screen alongside respected executives and military leaders. As I checked into my suite, I smiled quietly to myself. The building hadn't changed, but I certainly had. The following morning, I delivered my presentation to a packed conference hall. I spoke about resilience, integrity, and the importance of remaining true to one's principles even during life's darkest moments. I never mentioned Daniel, Olivia, or Margaret by name. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing courage when surrender seemed easier. When I finished speaking, the audience stood and applauded. Several attendees approached me afterward to thank me for sharing such honest experiences. One young officer told me that my words had inspired her to continue pursuing her dreams despite recent hardships. Hearing that meant more to me than any promotion or salary increase ever could. After the conference ended, I decided to have dinner in the hotel restaurant before returning to Seattle. As I walked toward my table, I once again passed the kitchen entrance. This time Daniel noticed me immediately. He hesitated for several moments before removing his apron and asking another employee to cover his station. Slowly, he walked toward me with uncertain steps. His face looked older than I remembered, and the confidence he once carried had completely disappeared. "Sarah," he said quietly, "could we talk for just a few minutes?" I looked at him calmly before nodding. We sat down at a small table near the corner of the restaurant. For several moments neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel lowered his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he began. "What I did to you was unforgivable. I thought money, status, and success would make me happy. Instead, I lost everything that truly mattered." I listened silently. "I betrayed the only person who genuinely cared about me," he continued. "Every day I regret that decision." Before I could respond, Margaret slowly approached our table. She looked nervous, almost afraid to meet my eyes. "Sarah," she said softly, "I treated you terribly. I judged you by your military rank instead of your character. I was wrong, and I have regretted it every day." For a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "I won't pretend that your actions didn't hurt me," I said honestly. "They changed my life forever." Both of them nodded. But those same experiences also made me stronger. If that night had never happened, I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of becoming. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Is there any chance you'll forgive us?" I thought carefully before answering. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I replied. "It means refusing to let bitterness control my future. I forgave both of you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace." Neither of them spoke. I stood up, picked up my handbag, and prepared to leave. Before walking away, I reached into my purse, removed several $100 bills, and quietly placed them on the table. Daniel immediately shook his head. "I can't accept your money." I smiled gently. "It isn't charity," I said. "It's payment for the dinner and a tip for the hard-working staff who made tonight possible." Then I looked at both of them one final time. "I sincerely hope your future is built on honesty this time." Without waiting for a response, I walked toward the hotel entrance. Outside, the evening sky above London glowed with thousands of city lights. A driver opened the door of the company vehicle waiting to take me to the airport. As the car pulled away from the hotel, I looked out the window and reflected on everything that had happened over the past 2 years. I had lost a husband, a sister, and a family I once believed would last forever. Yet in losing them, I had discovered my own strength, rebuilt my career, earned the respect of countless people, and created a life founded on integrity rather than appearances. No amount of money or status could ever replace the peace that came from knowing I had remained true to myself. People often believe victory means watching those who hurt us suffer. I learned something very different. Real victory is waking up each morning without hatred in your heart. It is building a future that no longer depends on the people who once tried to destroy your confidence. It is choosing kindness even after experiencing cruelty. As our car disappeared into the busy streets of London, I smiled at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was no longer the broken wife who had walked out of the Grand Wellington Hotel with a single suitcase. She was a soldier. She was a leader. She was independent. Most importantly, she was finally, completely free. And that is how my story truly ended, not with revenge, but with the greatest victory of all, a life lived on my own terms.